Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Sports Time HQ. I am your host, Fernando. Joined with me today is my great co-host, Gary. It is the first episode of Season 6 because the NFL season has officially come to a close. The new NFL season has officially started. So what better way than to look at least 1 year ahead and look at some 2026 free agency. And I don't know if anyone has looked at it yet. I know Gary and I have, and it looks to be loaded in free agency.
Yeah, it is. We're going to have a chance to talk about it today. And, you may think only 2025, free agency ain't over yet. But listen, some of these teams like Patriots, Browns, we're going to need to look for those guys in the near future.
And it's already been a wild 2025 start of the season with all the free agency and trades that's gone down. But there's a lot of big names between running backs, wide receivers, even some quarterbacks and tight ends. But we could see them take a possible trade mid-season if teams that they're on doesn't produce the way that they want because they only have 1 year left on their contract.
Exactly.
Well, let's first start with some great news and notes from around the league. Let's first start with Kyle Juszczyk. Well, there's been many departures for the 49ers, but one that came back is Kyle Juszczyk. He is re-signing with the 49ers on a 2-year, $8 million deal. I mean, I would have been surprised if they let him walk and just not re-sign him because it's safe to say he is one of the greatest fullbacks. He'll be in the Hall of Fame for the fullback position, but he's been a 49er for life, and I think you might as well just keep him there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think he's a good locker room guy, too. I think they all love him there, which is probably the biggest reason why they brought him back. You talk about some things that are bigger than football, even though he's obviously a great football player. So I think the fact that he means a lot to the city of San Francisco also went into re-signing him.
Yeah, exactly. Some other news, Juju Smith, he's re-signing with the Chiefs on a 1-year deal. Not really much news to that.
Not really,
to be honest with you. 49ers running back. Well, talk about the departures for the 49ers. Jordan Mason has been traded to the Vikings for a 2025 pick swap, which includes the 49ers getting pick 160, the Vikings getting pick 187, and the Vikings also receive a 2026 sixth round pick. I think this is a good trade for the Vikings because you're not really spending so much on Jordan Mason, who we saw have a solid and amazing breakout last season, filling in the shoes of Christian McCaffrey. But I think for fantasy value, I think this helps fantasy managers who have Jordan Mason because we know Jordan Mason was elite when he played. Now, it could have been just the Kyle Shanahan offense, but Aaron Jones is getting up there in age. Jordan Mason's this young new stud, and I'd like to see Jordan Mason getting some split carries with Aaron Jones, which I think in all will hurt Aaron Jones' fantasy stock value.
Yeah, I mean, I like the trade for the Vikings because I agree they didn't really give up anything. Also, when you talk about handcuffs and best RB2s in the game, Mason's definitely one of them. So good job by them. Do I think it hurts Aaron Jones' fantasy value? Maybe slightly. Honestly, I'm still on board with Aaron Jones. I mean, everybody
You've
thought
always been on board with Aaron Jones.
Well, everybody thought he was going to take a dramatic hit last year, including me. I did too, but he really didn't.
So. No, he didn't, and that's why he signed that 2-year extension, 2-year, $20 million extension. But, I mean, if you look at the running back room, I believe, for the 49ers, I think it's Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerendo, Patrick Taylor, and I think there's one more random one in there. So for fantasy managers who are looking for a handcuff, Isaac Guerendo is one of the better handcuffs in that offense to go get because he did produce a couple times when Jordan Mason went down as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you're in a dynasty, you go get Isaac Guerendo right now.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Let's see. Seahawks. This is a big one. They signed Cooper Kupp to a 3-year, $45 million deal. I mean, Keith must be excited with that, right?
I mean, maybe. Honestly, I don't think he's a wide receiver one anymore. I truly don't. And as much as I love JSN, I don't know if this move actually helps him or not. I really don't think it does. I think he flourishes in that slot role, and that's kind of what I think Cooper Cup is now. Literally the exact same thing. So I think there's going to be a lot of confusion in that offense, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I think there's already confusion now. I thought they were embracing the tank, and then now they're just not, I guess, when they signed Darnold and then signed Cup. So we'll see. That'll definitely be an intriguing team to look out for, I guess, because the upside's definitely there. But I don't think they're – honestly, I don't think they're going to live up to anything.
I think Cooper Cup – I agree with you with Cooper Cup hurting JSN because Cooper Cup is no longer a wide receiver one. Now it becomes the bigger question is who is going to step up? Will Cooper Cup have to play that wide receiver one role or will it be JSN? Maybe they're looking at JSN. Now, if you kept DK Metcalf, DK is number one, Cooper number two, JSN number three, that offense looks star-studded. I mean, Cooper Cup basically just an upgrade from Tyler Lockett, I believe, in my opinion. But, I mean, with DK gone, Tyler Lockett gone, who is the next guy that's going to fill the void? Sam Darnold's not getting a Justin Jefferson, but he's getting some talent, so he's not in a bad situation, I would say. Sam Darnold's fantasy stock, though, do you think that he is going to have a similar production of last season?
That's a good question. I mean, you look at what he did last year. Like he was, like I don't know if he was ever quarterback one, but he was up there. Like he was pretty high. He kind of fell off towards like the middle of the season. No was able to pick it back up like 2 of the last 3 weeks. So I believe he finished quarterback 9, maybe 10. So do I think he'll finish as a bottom top 10 quarterback again this year? I don't know. I think he definitely can. And honestly, probably will because he does have talent around him. But I think on the field, like as a team outside of fantasy, I really don't think the Seahawks offense is going to work out.
All right. Yeah, he did, in fact, finish as QB9. Never had a QB1 performance week, but he did have some top 5 ones and a QB2 finish. So let's move on to some other ones. Chiefs, they signed Gardner Minshew to back up Mahomes. Minshew Magic finds a home in Kansas City. Not like he's going to really start or anything. That's really it. It's all the news.
I saw they also signed Bailey Zappi.
That quarterback room is stacked, I tell you.
Yeah, I don't know what they're maybe they're giving some maybe they're giving Patrick Mahomes some guys to watch out for.
Some competition. Yeah, battle of the QB1.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think Zappi and Minshew are just kind of there, and I think the Chiefs are really just giving them the opportunity to battle for that QB2 spot, and whoever doesn't produce is probably going to end jobless.
Yeah, right.
Raheem Mostert, he finds a new home. He's signing with the Las Vegas Raiders on a 1-year, $2.1 million contract. I mean, we know Mostert had this big RB1 season a couple years ago. It's in the past. I don't see that happening. I think this is more just a depth role and some veteran role right there.
Yeah, I agree. I believe it was 2 years ago he finished his RB2 with like 20 touchdowns, 22 touchdowns, something like that, which is unbelievable. But yeah, he's far removed from that, unfortunately.
This one's a big one because I think this one was very shocking, not only if you were a Patriots fan, but I think in general. The Patriots released center David Andrews after 10 seasons. Now, what makes it interesting is he was an undrafted free agent, and he started 121 out of 124 regular season games since joining the team. So I think this really just goes to show that the Patriots are looking to really change the team around, change the dynamic, change the culture around, and whatever was in the Belichick offense, they want to make sure that there is no such thing as a Belichick offense now, and it's a new team, a new regime, new everything.
Yeah, no, that's definitely for sure. I saw that they're going to hold a ceremony for him. He meant a lot to the New England franchise. He was always one of their Iron Men up front. But yeah, I mean, I guess there's a new sheriff in town, and Vrabel's running with it. I like the direction the Patriots are going in. I think next couple of years they could be very, very sneaky.
Very, very sneaky. Hopefully. Maybe not your Browns, but
right.
Patriots maybe. This one, what used to be a talented wide receiver that everybody enjoyed looking at, and hoping that he would become a star-studded wide receiver. Turned out not to be, but he is signing with the Bills. It's Laviska Shenault.
Wow, I didn't even know about this. Had a lot of potential when he was in Jacksonville, but kind of bounced around the past couple of years and hasn't really done much. So I
No.
expect it to stay that way.
I think the Bills have just been signing random wide receivers, to be honest with you. It doesn't really matter for Josh Allen because he's still MVP and he still didn't need Amari Cooper on that offense. So, but hopefully Keon Coleman can step up to what we saw in the past.
Yeah.
Joe Flacco, he visited the Giants on Thursday. Now, we had him in one of our landing spots predictions. So I think if Joe Flacco goes anywhere, I think it's the Giants, obviously because he visited there. But I think other than that, he's just going to be a free agent until someone calls him.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the Browns picking up the phone and calling him again. But, we're about to have 7 quarterbacks in our quarterback room. So I don't know.
That's when you know there's something wrong with that team.
I'm checked out with that team.
Gary has officially checked out of the chat.
Yes.
Jaylen Warren, he has been officially tendered by the Steelers. The tender is a second-round pick, so I highly doubt anyone's going to sign him because then they would have to give up their second-round pick. So Jaylen Warren will 99% be a Pittsburgh Steeler for another year.
Yeah, which
we kind of expected.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his, so I kind of want to see him in that role. I mean, Najee's no longer there, and they just signed Kenneth Gainwell, so you would think that Jaylen Warren would be the clear-cut RB1, but I don't know. Maybe they don't want him after all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if they didn't tender him, they'd probably try and go after maybe Ashton Jeanty. But it doesn't look like they're going to be in for a running back, at least in the first round. Maybe in the day 2 picks, but definitely not in day 1.
Yeah, probably not.
Lastly, I don't know if you know about DK Metcalf's deal. He signed a 5-year, $150 million deal with those Steelers after getting the trade.
I did hear about that, and man, I don't think he's worth it, to be honest with you.
$30 million a year. $30 million a year.
I don't think he's worth it. I really don't. He's a great player, but I just don't see it. I really don't. I think he's overrated. I think the media has overhyped him over the years, and any quarterback would love to have Pickens and Metcalf as a 1 and 2. I mean, that's up there for the best wide receiver duo in the league, but I don't know. I mean, the Steelers somehow managed to get wins no matter what. So
yeah, I mean, they'll still be a nice 9-8 team.
Yeah, probably.
They also need to figure out what they're doing with the quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously they don't have Fields as an option anymore. Maybe they look at Joe Flacco.
I would actually like to see Joe Flacco in that offense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're still technically in on Russell Wilson and technically in on Aaron Rodgers, but I saw both parties, Steelers and Russell Wilson, they're both seeing what Aaron Rodgers wants to do, because I know Russell Wilson says that he has a place that he favors right now, but he's waiting to see what Rodgers does. So I'm assuming the place that Wilson wants to go is either New York or back to Pittsburgh, which I don't really think, but it's got to be one of those spots because that's the top 2 spots right now for Rodgers.
Also, can't forget about the Vikings for Rodgers.
I guess. Sure.
they're still. I saw a news from Sleeper. It was the Vikings are holding meetings about the discussion whether they're interested in Rodgers and whatnot. And I'm like, you have JJ McCarthy. I think at this point, JJ McCarthy's better than Aaron Rodgers.
They're just
that we've seen in recent years.
They're just trying to complete this fake arc.
I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening. I mean, I think this is just all media attention, in my opinion.
Exactly.
In the end, we already know Giants are probably going to sign Russ. Rodgers is probably going to go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And to see Rodgers blow up Mike Tomlin's streak of a winning season just would be so sad to see.
I wouldn't mind it. It's a win-win for me because I'm a Rogers guy. I've always liked Rogers. If they do good, I'm happy because Rogers probably has a bounce back here. But if they do
Hmm.
bad, it's fine too because it's the Steelers. So
Yeah, and they're in your division.
right.
You got any more news and notes?
Not that I guess I'll just bring up the fact that Cooper Rush just got signed for 2 years, almost $13 million. What's that about?
Yeah, I did just in fact see that. Yeah,
He went
he's
to the
leaving Baltimore.
Ravens.
Trey Lance, the free agent. The Cowboys needed to back up. 12.2, worth up to $12.2 million.
I don't know. $6 million a year for Cooper Rush is, I guess, where we're at now.
It's just wild. It's wild how much these backup. I mean, Kirk Cousins. They didn't cut Kirk Cousins. He's going to get so much guarantee. He's less than $1 million away from passing Tom Brady's 23 season or 22 season career earnings in
Wow,
14 years.
that's crazy. That's
Just
crazy.
just crazy fact to see.
Unbelievable.
Well, 2026 free agency is, I would say, right around the corner, but it's about 1 year away.
Right.
So what better way to start the new season for us than starting the new season for them the following year? 2026 free agency quarterbacks. It's not that big, I will say, for 2026 quarterbacks, but running backs and wide receivers are very, very heavy. Some quarterbacks I want to kind of talk about. Geno Smith. He is obviously with the Raiders. Right now, his market value is $43 million. That's how much the market value is based on Spot Track. That's what we're using in this. But yeah, Geno, I mean, he's 35 years old. Are we going to see him get a big contract? Like if he produces with the Raiders, like Sam Darnold did with the Vikings, could we see a long-term extension for Geno? Or is he just kind of that bounce around quarterback?
No, apparently that he will get a new contract because the Raiders said that they already want to do it. So we
Yeah.
might not have to wait that long to see it. But yeah, they said that they want to make Geno Smith the quarterback of the future, and we'll see because he's going to play for them this year. But again, they've already talked about it, so we might not have to wait long before we see this new unbelievable deal for Smith.
Again, $43 million he's projected to make.
Crazy.
This random guy just finds a way to be talked about in anything. Daniel Jones.
I hate him.
$5 million is his market value right now. Just an FYI. That's his market value. Yeah. His average annual value previously was 14 mil. He did sign that contract with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the only way I can see him getting a contract somewhat around 5 or even 5 plus is if he somehow beats Anthony Richardson out of the starting role.
The only way I can see him earning $5 million if he made the best investment of his life and just it catapulted into a $5 million swimming pool. But I mean, like, let's be honest. Daniel Jones is terrible, and in the unlikely event that he's able to beat out Anthony Richardson, I guess then that means the Colts would probably sign him back, and I guess we'd see a new big deal for Daniel Jones, which I hope would not happen because we already saw this one time.
Yeah, I really hope not. I really, really hope not. I think he's top 10 in most money earned as a quarterback.
That's so stupid. That is just so stupid. But
so
is Deshaun Watson. So I mean, I can't.
Yeah, that's true.
But
that's true, and he barely has played.
Right.
Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I put this in for Jimmy Garoppolo because of the fact that the Rams have been talking about having Jimmy Garoppolo as their next quarterback of the future. After Matthew Stafford, they managed to get a deal with Matthew Stafford. Jimmy Garoppolo is projected to earn $3 million. That's currently his market value. He is, crazy to say, he is 34 years old.
Yeah.
And he's been in the league for 12 years.
Yeah, he's not young anymore. Not under Brady anymore. He's an old man. And, I think to myself, the Rams might want to have him around for like 2 years after Stafford's departure because maybe
A
they
bridge
want,
quarterback.
right. They want a bridge quarterback, but also they'd probably draft one. And
Yep.
let's not forget that Jimmy G sat behind Brady and learned some things. While it may not have translated to the field, there are some people where they're just better coaches and players, and maybe he's able to pass on some Brady traits to whoever the new king is in LA. So that'll definitely be something to keep an eye on in the future. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what will happen. I mean, most likely he will be only a bridge quarterback, and I think if he does go
Right.
anywhere, I don't see him going anywhere else after that.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, I mentioned Jake Browning in here, and that's because he's projected to be a restricted free agent next year with Cincinnati. The only reason why is because when we did see Jake Browning, he did actually produce very, very well for himself when he had to fill the shoes of Joe Burrow, who got injured and was out for the year. So I think Jake Browning is a solid QB2 behind Burrow if he were to go down. And I think he's like a Joe Milton in a way. Like he has a chance to be a starting quarterback. It's just, can he be the starting quarterback anywhere? And I think we just haven't seen it in a while.
I agree with you. He actually looked pretty solid when he came in, and I think out of the last 2 or 3 guys that we named, I think he's better than Jimmy G and Daniel Jones. So I would list him as a 3 guy that we have here on this 2026 quarterback free agency list. But yeah, he looked good in the time that he got. Of course, he's got all the weapons around him in that Bengals offense. What quarterback wouldn't flourish? I could probably name a few. But yeah, I think that he could be a guy that could possibly compete for a starting job in a spot like Tennessee or wherever else.
I would like to see him on Tennessee. Give him a starting role there.
Yeah, I mean, Will Levis is terrible. So
yeah, very true on that. Lastly, on quarterbacks, it's the biggest one of them all. From Mr. Relevant to Mr. Most Relevant to talk about in free agency for the quarterbacks is Brock Purdy, a guy that was drafted very last pick in the draft. $934,000 is what he's making. His current market value, Gary, is $59 million a year.
I don't get it. I mean, I like Brock Purdy. I actually really do like Brock Purdy. I think, and I try not to include this in my, how I think about a player, but I can't not think about the fact that he was the genuine last overall pick and then ends up taking his team to the Super Bowl. Of course, he had an absolutely loaded team, but it's like, it's like when your stats go up when you get more minutes in a game. You have to produce no matter what. So he still had to go out there and produce. He still had to go out there and lead the offense, which he did. So I like Brock Purdy. I definitely did not think that he was deserving of those MVP conversation talks like 2 years ago, whatever it was. And I definitely don't think he's deserving of $60 million. Like him, but I think that is absolutely insane.
Yeah, I think if you talk about him making money, 35 to 45, and 45 being generous is a max deal for him, I would say, in my opinion. But I think if there's any deal possible for Brock Purdy and the 49ers could take a chance and risk on it, you don't sign him until you see what he does midseason. If your team is doing good, like he was a couple years ago, and this team could be going to the Super Bowl again or playoffs again, then maybe, you could sign him. Still not $60 million worth, but you could sign him. If you have a season like last year, then I think you let him walk, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that I honestly think is a real possibility of what can happen, because if you're the Niners or any team or any person in their right mind, for that matter, you're not going to dump $60 million a year into something that you obviously know hasn't worked the past couple of years. So,
yeah, and I think the bigger question will be, if you do let him walk, is there a team willing to spend that money, or is there even a team willing to have him as a starting quarterback?
the Browns probably.
Yeah, you might as well just sign $60 million. Just
Right.
keep throwing your money away.
Exactly.
At that point, you'll have 95% of your cap in the quarterback room.
Right. Realistically, no. There's no team that would pay that. But I mean, with the way the financial status of the game is going, I wouldn't be surprised if there are 5 teams that would want to pay for that.
Interesting. Yeah, very true. I do have some news per Jordan Reed. Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart could be in play with the 21st overall pick in this year's draft with the Steelers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I haven't ruled that out, but that would be definitely an offense to remember because I think he is a complete a-hole. I guess I'll say that. I really don't think he's a guy that he's a great guy on the field, but he's another diva in the head, and I think that mixed with DK, mixed with Pickens,
that's so true.
Would not be great at all.
That is a
trio
trio
player, but as a person, he is not a good guy, and I don't want to say that would translate to on the field stuff. But
it could though
happen. I've seen it happen before. So
with the 3 divas, it could.
Right. Exactly.
I think if he does get drafted there, this is if Russ goes to the Giants and say Rodgers goes to the Vikings. I think fantasy wise, Dart's value skyrockets because of the offense. I mean, I think for fantasy dynasties, I think right now he's being drafted maybe late second, early third round pick for the fantasy rookies. And I think if you're looking for something along those lines and he gets drafted 21st, he now becomes a late first round pick.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's the thing with the Steelers, right? Like they have talent on that offense. Of course, I'm not the biggest Freiermuth guy, but he's up there for some of the best tight ends in the game. You got Pickens, who just showed that he can be the bona fide wide receiver 1 star.
Yeah.
That Pittsburgh fans have been saying that he is. And then you just go out and get another top 12 to 15 wide receiver in the game with DK Metcalf. So definitely have a ton of talent on that Pittsburgh offense. And let's not talk about the pass catching ability, or let's not forget to mention the pass catching ability of Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go into running backs now. And the running backs are very, very popular in this draft. I mean, not in this draft, in this free agency, because of how loaded it is. I think we have like 10 running backs almost. And we'll go quick on these. But the biggest one I want to talk about is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going to be, he's right now 32 years old. He's projected his market value to be just under $14 million a year, which is still not enough for him. But if he produces, he'll probably still get paid from Baltimore, because I would be so surprised if Baltimore lets him walk or even go. But I think, if anything, Derrick Henry will stay in Baltimore for the rest of his career.
I completely agree with you. I think that, especially if this year goes well, I don't think there's another place in the league that Derrick Henry would want to go. Clearly, he wanted to be a Raven, made it happen, and so far he's taken it and ran with it. I mean, he's still, in my opinion, the second best running back in the game, maybe third, and I think he's going to stay that way until he retires.
Yeah. Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, those are the 2 former Pittsburgh Steelers running backs, or Jaylen Warren's still a Steeler, but he's projected $7 million in his market value. Najee's projected $9 million in his market value. They're both just around 28 years old. Najee is 28. Jaylen is in the beginning of his 27-year-old, but by the time he'll be 28 as well. This is interesting because Jaylen Warren, they could let walk for Pittsburgh, and Najee, if he has a breakout season like Aaron Jones did, he could stay in Los Angeles for the Chargers.
Yeah, and I think these are obviously 2 guys to watch, because as much as I don't like the Steelers, I like both of those backs. Like I've been fans of both of those backs for a while now.
Didn't you have Jaylen Warren as like an RB10 finish
Yeah,
this
I
past
had
season?
him finishing as the RB8 this past year. Um, I figured that he was going to take over that running back room. Didn't necessarily happen. He started to pick it up towards the end of the year, but definitely nowhere near RB8 level. Um, but I truly think that as a running back one, he can put up numbers like a mini
Mm.
Austin Eckler. Like I really do think so.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that with Warren, and I think what you had with an RB8 finish last season is what you're. I think I'm going to expect to see from you this year, because now he has all the potential to actually finish as the RB8.
Right, and if it stays that way, where he's the top guy in that room, I really truly think he can finish as a top 10 wide receiver. I said Mini Eckler. Obviously, I'm not talking about now. When he was in LA and he finished as the RB1, at least 1 year. I don't remember if it was numerous, but he
Mm.
finished as the RB1 1 year. I am not saying that he can finish as the RB1, but I truly think he has the running and receiving capability to be able to finish as a top 10 back.
Yeah, I can easily see where you're coming from. And with Austin Eckler, he actually doesn't have market value for next season, but his previous average he was getting was $4.2 million. So I think, obviously, as much as I hate to say Austin Eckler's prime time is in the past, and unfortunately it is with him being almost 31 years old. And I think he's going to be in Washington as a backup of Brian Robinson. And I think that's just how we're going to see it. And Austin Eckler will probably be a free agent next year and stay that way and find a new home.
Yeah, that's probably right. However, the time he's gotten in Washington, he actually has produced pretty well. I would like to see him split the ball more with Brian Robinson. I'm still not
Agreed.
this Brian Robinson guy, to be honest with you. I like the I like the split backfield that they have. I would like to see a little bit more. Of course, both guys tended to some injuries here and there throughout the year, but when they're both healthy, I think that's one of the best RB duos in the league.
Yeah, we'll go right into Brian Robinson, who is also projected to be a free agent. He's about to turn 27. He is projected to make $8.2 million next year. It's his average.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm definitely not bought into him yet, but he's still young on the younger side, and has shown flashes that he's a dual threat back, and the fact that he's speedy but is also kind of a bigger body. So I like the thought of giving him money because even though I'm not bought in now, I think that he can still take another step up. So
Yeah, I mean, I think I also am not hugely into Brian Robinson, and I think $8 million is a little too much for him. But if he can be a star-studded running back, then sure. I mean, then 8 million isn't too bad.
I think he's going to be able to take that step.
Let's talk about, yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Brian Robinson. Brees Hall, 24 years old, about to turn 25, still prime in his career. He's projected to be a free agent, projected to earn $7 million, not even more than Brian Robinson, which I find bizarre. But $7 million is his market value. I think if the Jets were dumb, then he's going to walk. But hopefully the Jets can be smart and you sign Brees Hall to a long-term deal, because Brees Hall is a great running back.
Yeah, he is a great running back. Kind of another dual threat guy. He can pass catch really well. I don't know what to think about him though, because I feel like he's very inconsistent at times. Has shown great flashes, but then you see other games where he's got like 9 rushes for like 15 yards, and it's like, what is he doing? Um, hasn't always been blessed with the greatest O line in New York, but they also haven't been the worst at times as well. I would like to see what happens with him because I think if he were to go to a good offense, there's a possibility that he could finish as RB1 in fantasy some year.
Yeah, and we've seen him in the past finish up there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Kenneth Walker now. Kenneth Walker, again, he did very well for Seattle Seahawks. He's, again, just around that 25-year-old age. He's projected $10.4 million in his market value, one of the highest, just behind Derrick Henry. I just don't see him worth $10.4 million. But again, the market value for running backs is so up and down. I just I'd be surprised if Seattle keeps him, to be honest.
I'm not a big fan of him either. I'm really not. Um, he missed a lot of games this year, and I feel like he's always kind of dealing with some sort of injury. If you're a Kenneth Walker owner, you're
Exactly.
kind of growing tired of seeing that red Q tag next to his name week after week after week. And he's only 24. So it's like he's already dealing with his injuries. A few years later, how's it going to end up? I think he's a great player when he's healthy, but he does miss a lot. And every year, his yards, um, his yards for the season have gotten worse. He's gone from 1050 to 905 to 573. Granted, he only played 11 games this year, but he only ran for 52 yards a game. That's his lowest from 2 years ago when he was at
Yep.
70 yards per game in his rookie year. Not to mention his touchdowns have also gone down every year from 9 to 8 to 7. I think he's on a steady decline, and I think he'll be solid for his career, but I feel like a lot of people still are clinging on to a lot of hope for him.
Yeah, because he came in as a very great prospect. The injuries is really what has hurt him in his career.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think this is when, if we see him getting injured again this year, that's when I think Seattle just needs to move on from him because he becomes more of a liability than a help in the offense.
I agree.
Let's pair up Javonte Williams and Rico Dowdle. Javonte is projected actually more than Rico Dowdle in the market value. He's projected $6.8 million. Rico is projected $6.1 million. Rico, former Dallas Cowboy running back, he lands in Carolina this year on a one-year deal for $6.25. And Javonte Williams ends up on Dallas for a $3 million contract. I think Rico has nothing to lose in Carolina because I don't know if he's going to be really a starter there. It could be just more of a backup, which if you're paying a backup 6.2 is still, 6.2 is still a lot. But Javonte has everything to lose because he signed a $3 million contract with Dallas, and that is a very cheap contract for Dallas. Surprised Dallas even spent that much on a running back because they don't like to spend money. But Javonte, if he wants to rejuvenate his career, where he's about to be 26, he can still earn that long-term deal, a 3-year contract of like $24 million, $25 million, $26 million, whatever it is. He just needs to produce very well in Dallas. And I think Javonte needs to break out this year.
Don't see it with Javonte. I truly don't. I don't think he's that good anymore. And you talk about Kenneth Walker having an injury problem. Here's another guy that's always dealing with an injury problem. Only played 4 games in 2022. He missed a couple games the past 2 years as well. He's never had a rushing season over 903 yards, and that was his rookie year in 2021. Has never gone over 4 rushing touchdowns in a season. Has some solid receiving capability, but still nothing too crazy in my opinion. I'm not a fan of his. I really never have been. He was also another pretty highly touted prospect when he was at UNC. But the game just hasn't really translated. I feel like people are clinging on to the fact that, well, he's never been in that bona fide starting role. Now maybe he has the opportunity to do that in Dallas. And if he's able to get that starting role and produce in it, I will shut my mouth. I will never talk bad about Javonte Williams anymore. But truly, I don't see it. I really don't think he's going to be anything good. He'll always be okay, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's had his up and downs in the years, but again, new offense, new chance to change his career. I think that's the opportunity that we want to see from Javonte. And I think he could end up being big breakout candidate for a lot of people because of where the situation lies. And I think that's going to actually bring his stock up a lot more. And I think that's when we may even see him be more of a bust candidate in a way. He's got a big possibility.
I mean, the thing I don't like is I'm just looking at a few numbers right here. His yards per game have gone down every year since he's entered the league in 2021.
Yeah.
Started at 53 in 2021, down to 51, 48, and 30 this season. Of course, his attempts from last year to this year have gone down, but his attempts from 2021 to 2023 actually went up a few a game and was producing less. So I truly don't think he's this big productive guy. I really don't think he'll ever be. To speak on Rico Dowdle for just a brief moment, I actually didn't know that he ran for 1,000 yards last year. That was kind of a surprise to me. Kind of a sneaky season, I guess. So I think that
Yeah.
he could be a guy that shows some flashes during seasons.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's kind of, we know about James Brooks' injury concerns. Miles Sanders is there with that long-term contract. Maybe Rico's there to split the workload with Miles. But again, I
Yeah,
don't think Jonathan Brooks has really much relevancy still, in my opinion.
yeah.
Let's go into Rachaad White. This one's an interesting one because he's 27 years old. He's making $1.2 million average per year. Now, he didn't have a season that we're used to seeing last year because Bucky White came and took over. But you look at 2023, and he finishes the RB7 in half PPR leagues and RB4 in PPR leagues. And I think that's huge. Last year, he finished as the RB22 in the leagues for PPR. But I think Rachaad White, I think, still has a lot of life in him. He's still got a chance. He's only been in the league for 3 years, this now being his 4th season. I kind of just wish he gets traded away from Tampa and finds a new home because we know he's not going to be the starter anymore because Bucky Irving's there.
I'm sick of the not the 49ers. I'm sick of the Buccaneers getting good running backs and not knowing what to do with them because this is just a repeated occurrence. Saw it with Ronald Jones. He ran for 1,000 yards, and then
Yeah.
randomly they go to beat up Leonard Fournette, who I know you're a fan of when he was in Jacksonville. I also was, but he just was never the same running back when he was in Jacksonville. And they just
Yep.
completely disregard of Ronald Jones, and then Leonard Fournette comes in. He does pretty solid, but then he's gone. Now they have Rachaad White, who runs for pretty much 1,000 yards and has 550 receiving yards, has a career year. And then they say, you know what, screw you. We're going to go with this guy who, of course, they drafted, I believe, in like the 4th round, maybe. So
Yeah.
he showed a lot for what the value they got in that was. But I'm looking at Rachaad White right now. He ran for 4 yards per carry, had 9 total touchdowns on the year. I mean, he was still productive in the time that he got. A lot of people kind of jumped on him early because he didn't have that great start to the season. But even, throughout the entire season, he produced. And I completely agree with you. I wish he would get out of there, get a spot that actually respects him, because I think that he could finish as an annual top 10 back in fantasy.
I'd like to see him on New England because I
Yeah,
don't think
let's see
Stevenson's
that
the
too.
guy.
I would like to see that because I think it would make Drake May more comfortable having a pass catching back. Ramondre really hasn't been
Very
that
true.
guy to be able to pass catch. Drake May's still young, going into a second year of the career. They haven't yet gotten a receiver. They have a solid tight end room, but if they get a running back pass catcher, I think that opens up so much more, and I think that makes Drake May all the more confident.
Yeah, I think they were looking at Dylan Sampson
Oh,
in
from
the
Tennessee.
draft. Yeah, they were talking to him, maybe taking him as a day 2 pick.
Yeah, he's pretty good. So.
Lastly, let's pair up the 2 running backs, the 2 possible big name backs in free agency. Kyron Williams, who's right now making less than $1 million a year. He's 25 and a half years old, and he's projected to get about $10.4 million. His market value currently. James Cook, just a little less than that. He's almost 26 and a half as well. He's making $1.4 million a year. He's projected $10.2 million a year in his market value. I mean, these 2 running backs could have big homes next year. And I think if I'm Buffalo, I want to keep, if I'm both teams, actually, I want to keep both of them. Just the question is can you pay them what they're looking for? Obviously, James Cook, wants $15 million.
Man, I love both these guys. Used to not really be the biggest fan of James Cook, but this year I was high on James Cook and he went off, and now I love him. Kyron Williams, same thing. I was high on him this year and he took off. 1,300 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns. Those are both career highs for him. I think he's a stud, and I think that both of these guys need to be paid. Of course, it's going to sound like a lot of money for both of them when their deals come out, but I think if you're the Rams in the Buffalo Bills, you got to keep these guys around.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go into the wide receivers, and there is a
A ton.
lot of wide receivers. Will we have enough time talking about them? We will, because we will make sure that we get all of them in. But let's talk first with the top three wide receivers with their market values. T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, and Jamar Chase. Those are relatively the bigger guys to be talked about. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both on the same team. They're projected both to make a lot of money. T. Higgins, $27 million. Jamar Chase, $35 million. Terry McLaurin, 29.9, basically $30 million. These are big. I think if you're Washington, you need to keep Terry because that is your wide receiver one there. He is 30 years old. Just keep that in mind. T. Higgins is 27, making 27 mil a year. I mean, I think, I think Cincinnati, and they're trying to get Jamar Chase and they're trying to get T. Higgins to stay. Can they afford both of them is the bigger question. Hopefully they can for Cincinnati's sake. But yeah, I don't think you let any of these three walk.
Well, I mean, you look at Terry McLaurin, and he just had pretty much a career year, not in receiving yards, but he's never had more than 7 touchdowns in a season up until this year when he had 13.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you see what he can do when he has a top quarterback in the game, in my opinion. And obviously Daniels is only going to get better. And I think that's the same thing about Terry McLaurin. Yeah, he is 31, but he's still relatively young into his NFL career. He's only been in the league for 6 seasons. I think that you have to pay him no matter what it is because I think we're just seeing the potential come to fruition now with Terry McLaurin that we really have been seeing every year, but because they've never had that good of a team or that good of a quarterback, it hasn't really been brought to the light. And as for the two guys in Cincinnati, I mean, those guys obviously have to be paid. At least Jamar Chase, he's way too good. I've said this before, obviously coming off the Triple Crown, but I think he is the best wide receiver in the game right now. I would take him over Justin Jefferson, and I would. And T. Higgins, I mean, he's unanimous, in my opinion, best wide receiver two in the game. So he obviously also has to get paid as well.
Yeah, I think these three need to be on that starting role for each of their teams. Like they need to stay on those rosters.
Yeah.
Debo on Washington now. No market value there for him, but he's right now just shy of $24 million. I think this is really just a quick thing to mention about him is he's on Washington. If he does really good, Washington will re-sign him as well. But other than that, they might just let him walk.
Yeah, I think this season will be a big tell what they want to do going forward. I think he's just going to be a rental, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Yeah.
$24 million is a lot for what he brings a lot to the team, but he's getting older, and we just saw Washington do a lot without him. How much will he, make the team that much better? I don't know. Is it worth $24 million a year? I personally don't think so. I think he's just a rental. However, if the Commanders do get a number that they like, say it's in like the 18 million range, I wouldn't be surprised if they sign him back to another 1 or 2 year deal.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I think if they can get a cheap deal on him, maybe re-sign him. But like you said, cheap rental deal. If he does good, he does good. If he doesn't, well, you just go find someone else. Because you really didn't have anyone behind Terry McLaurin either.
Right. True.
Mike Evans, 32.5. Going to be a free agent. I think this is a quick conversation. Mike Evans needs to stay in Tampa. I think Tampa needs to do whatever they can to keep Mike Evans there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you talk about a guy that's never had a season under 1,000 receiving yards. I mean, that's almost unheard of. And he's gone double-digit touchdowns and for the last 5 seasons. So I've been able to watch Mike Evans more and more throughout the years, and I've began to love him more and more as the years have gone. And it just shows that they need to bring him back because he's been critical to whatever success the team has had since he's gotten there.
Yeah, 100%. De'Ami Brown, I just want to quickly mention him because he's on Jacksonville making $10 million this year. His market value is $2 million. I think if he produces like he did with Washington, with Jacksonville, he'll make that same money. And then also want to mention Christian Kirk, who left Jacksonville for Houston in the trade. Projected, there's no market value for him right now based on Spot Track, but he is making $18 million. Again, this could be an easy one. He could make around that if he produces with Houston. But other than that, I doubt he's going to make $18 million a year again.
Yeah, De'Ami Brown will be a guy to watch out for because obviously he exploded in the playoffs, and at the moment, I think he's getting what 10 to 12 million. I think he's getting 12 million
10.
this year. 10 million, okay, 10 million this year. I think that's a lot. I don't think he's worth that, but he showed out in the playoffs. If he's able to do that for the full season, which I really don't see, but if he is, this money is definitely worth it. So I'll be personally keeping an eye on him. Christian Kirk, yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of his, but he's definitely not worth the 18 million that he might be due for going forward.
Exactly. Cortland Sutton, 30 years old, projected $26.5 million market value. I mean, I've always loved him, and I think he stays in Denver.
Probably. I mean, you talk about a guy that just not in receiving yards, but pretty much just had a career year. Another guy that you talk about Denver when he's been there, they haven't really had a great quarterback. I'm not quick to jump the gun on Bo Nix and calling him a great quarterback, but he had a great season. I'll say that. So I think, it is a lot of money. I think that they have to pay Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest one to see because say Drake London does struggle. I mean, sorry, not Drake London. Who we'll talk about in a second. Cortland Sutton, if he struggles, then I think we may see him walk.
Yeah, probably.
I want to kind of pair up a couple of guys. Drake London, right now, still on his rookie contract, 24 years old. Also, Jameson Williams, who's on his rookie contract. These are two club options, whether or not they will get that fifth-year option, I believe. $23 million is the market value for Drake, and Jameson is $19 million. I think these two are players. I think Jameson Williams is more likely to stay in Detroit than Drake London is in Atlanta because I think they could just move on from Drake London and try and find a new receiver because the team just looks horrendous. And why Kirk Cousins is still on the team, still mind-boggling. But you're spending a lot of money on these players that shouldn't be on the team, like Kirk Cousins, if you're not starting him. So I think that's my reasoning for Drake London not being there next year.
Man, I don't know if these guys are worth this money. I really don't think so. I've never been a Drake London fan, and I can't say that he's worth $23 million. Of course, I believe this is the best year that he has had since coming into the league. Didn't really start great, but he looks great this year. I'm still not bought in on him yet, honestly. And Jameson Williams, it's the same thing, like for the different reason. The fact that he's always been injured, kind of been dealing with some off the field issues. But this is the first year that we saw from him in which he's kind of taken off. And that might have something to do with the Ben Johnson, drawn up offense. This year will for sure be a telltale of what they want to do with him going forward.
100%. A lot of big names from that draft as well, because going into the next two duos, the other ones that have the club option of that first round pick, and that's Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. $23.2 million for Garrett Wilson, $17.8 for Chris Olave. I think we need to see Chris Olave come back from the injury and to really determine whether or not he's going to be worth that much money. But Garrett Wilson, I think, deserves the money. I think we've seen that he can be truly a wide receiver one and produce multiple times. And I think sky's the limit again with Justin Fields with Garrett Wilson duo.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these are two guys that I've watched for a while now. I think Chris Olave is getting severely underrated. top 2 years in the league, he went for over 1,000 yards with Derek Carr as his quarterback, who, granted, has played good sometimes, but in my opinion, I really don't think he's that good. And Olave would be even better without him because, man, he just does not care about Chris Olave at all, Derek Carr, or any of his wide receivers for that matter, because he loves throwing 5 hospital balls a game. And this is why we see Chris Olave. Of course, he's a smaller wide receiver, but we see him take a ton of just brutal hits. I would love to see him get out of there, to be completely honest with you. And to talk about Garrett Wilson, he had one of the greatest catches I've ever seen this year. I believe when they're facing the Texans, that was unbelievable. He has made some of the greatest catches, in all honesty, that I've ever seen as well. So I think that he is just a freak athlete, a stud wide receiver. He needs to be paid by the Jets or wherever else he goes, if he is to want a trade.
Which is also a possibility, but I think he'll stay there. I think they're gonna use that first round tender on him and get that 5th-year option.
Mm-hmm.
Also want to mention New Orleans wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, who's also projected on undrafted free agent, $5.2 million. He wasn't drafted in the first round, so he doesn't have that club option. But he, I think, was studded, and I think if they do let Chris Olave walk, they will re-sign Rashid Shaheed.
I agree with that, and I have him in fantasy. I have him in dynasty. Sorry, I like it because obviously he's young, but man, before he tore his ACL at the start of the year, he was balling out.
Yeah,
like I think he was just behind that top 10 wide receiver finish at the time. So I agree with you. I think no matter what, they're going to sign him back. He seems to catch like a 60-yard touchdown every other week. So obviously he's got the big home run playability, and he very well could be a critical part of the Saints offense moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see. And I hope he can come back from the injury as well.
Yeah, agreed.
George Pickens, again, he's on his rookie contract still. He's projected $23.5 million, 25 years old. I think, for instance, you sign DK for such a long-term deal. Maybe you also sign George Pickens, but I think with so much wide receiver money right there, I'd be surprised if you keep both.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that, but I think we'd be contradicting ourselves if we say that about Pittsburgh and not about
Cincinnati.
Which kind of, I guess I'm also contradicting myself in the sense that Cincinnati hasn't paid T. Higgins yet, right? Like they really haven't. So we'll see if they're able to do that. I think they're going to be able to. That's why I'm going to say I think they're going to be able to sign George Pickens as well, the Steelers. But it will be shaky because it is a lot of money. Obviously, they just gave DK Metcalf $30 million a year. What are they going to give Pickens? Who knows? But it's going to be a decent amount too.
Exactly. I want to pair up Jacoby Myers and DeAndre Hopkins because their market values are quite similar. Jacoby Myers projected $17.3 million a year, and DeAndre Hopkins, who is only making $5 million this year, is projected market value of $15 million.
Wow.
I think personally, Hopkins will continue to make cheap money, like $5 million, because if he produces well in Baltimore, and Baltimore does do really well with that trio, I think he's just going to keep doing that. You could definitely say his market value is at 15, but I think realistically we're not going to see him make that much. And same thing for Jacoby. I think 17 million is just a little too much for him. He's making 11 right now. I think maybe 13 to 15 really is his range, in my opinion.
I'm a fan of Jacoby Myers, and I wouldn't give him more than $12 million a year, to be honest with you. I think this is his peak, and I like what I see out of Jacoby Myers, but it's nothing more than what I'd want to pay $12 million for a year. And to talk about DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, I completely agree with you. I think he's going to be solid for Baltimore, maybe come up big a few times, but I think all in all, he'll probably give you like a 500 to 700 yard receiving season and not be that insanely critical to the offense. To the fact that if this team is to keep winning, he would not get much better offers than 1 year for $5 or $6 million, and he would want to stay in Baltimore anyways.
Exactly. And I'd be surprised if he moves on from Baltimore. He's on the team that I think he can really win and help win a Super Bowl,
Yeah,
even though he was on the Chiefs.
yeah, that's true.
Lastly, for wide receivers, I want to talk about Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, both Green Bay wide receivers. Christian Watson, former top pick drafted for the wide receiver room for Green Bay, and then Romeo Doubs. He's actually the only one with a market value from that draft. He's predicted about $12 million a year. Honestly, in my opinion, if I'm Green Bay, if you draft a wide receiver here this year, you let them two walk. You have great wide receivers right now, as of now, in the free agency market, and you go sign a solid wide receiver too.
I think that you should let Christian Watson walk, to be honest with you. I kind of was a big fan of his after his rookie year. He was very solid, showed some flashes, but he's just not that guy. Been dealing with injury his entire career pretty much, and has never gone over 620 receiving yards, which he had this year. His touchdowns have decreased every season since his rookie year in 2022. I don't think you're going to get much better with Christian Watson, to be honest with you. And I think the lingering injury issue is obviously a big thing for me. I think that you should sign back Romeo Doubs, another guy that I don't think is insane, but I think he's done more in Green Bay than Christian Watson has.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I don't think Christian Watson is a wide receiver one in that offense.
I agree.
Let's quickly go through some tight ends. And there's again some big tight end names that I think need to be addressed and needs to be talked about. And what better way to talk about it than the tight end one who we've used to see in many, many years is Travis Kelce. There's no market value for a lot of the tight ends, but including Travis Kelce, who is 36 by the time we see around this year, next year, will be around 37 years old. Unfortunately, I think this is the end for Travis Kelce. I think this is the year that becomes his final year and he retires.
I agree with you, unfortunately, which sucks because, I mean, we grew up watching him and he's one of the best tight ends I've ever seen. But, yeah, he is 36, 37, and I think he's kind of hinted that this is his last run. Obviously, he took some time to reflect on if this past season would be his last season. I think after this year, especially if they are to win a Super Bowl, I think that he's just going to go out on top. And even if they don't, I think he's done. So.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I think this is, no matter what happens here, this is the end.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about George Kittle, 32 and a half years old, just about. He's projected to get a little bit more than what he was previously making. His market value is $16.3 million. I think he stays in San Francisco. Again, this is a guy that's been in San Francisco really his whole career. Why change that?
Yeah, and I mean, stats-wise, I think he was the best or second best tight end in football this year. He really showed out this season, was kind of one of the only bright spots in that San Fran offense. And I think that he's just in line for another payday, and I don't think he's going to go anywhere else besides San Fran.
Yeah. And that's what we see a lot with these tight ends that have had long tenures. But something that has been rumored around is Dallas Goedert, who is on his final year of his contract. There's rumors he could get traded sometime during this season. Maybe they sign a tight end or draft a tight end or go for one next year. But Dallas Goedert's been on the trade block from what it seems like. He is on his last year of his contract, so that could be the reason. But yeah, he's 31.2 years old.
Yeah, it's a guy that I've never really been that high on. But, you know, he started off the season really well, then kind of the injury complications and kind of derailed his season. But, you know, he'll always be solid for wherever he goes, but he's always been overhyped, in my opinion. He's been in the league for 7 years and has never had a season over 830 receiving yards and has never caught more than 5 touchdowns in a season. Yet, he's always like at the bottom of that top 5 tight ends drafted, which is crazy to say. Whether it speaks volumes to how overrated he is or to just how bad the tight end room or how bad the tight end position usually is in fantasy. I don't know, maybe a little bit of both.
Mm.
But yeah, he'll always be okay wherever he goes. But I wouldn't be surprised if Philly moves on from him because I just don't think he adds that much value, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think you see him, like you mentioned, in that bottom 5 category of the tight ends, but it's just because tight ends are just so hard to come by with fantasy because you'll have them produce this solid 1 week performance and they stay top 5 for so many weeks because you don't really
Right.
see those big guys go up there.
Exactly.
So I think Dallas Goedert, and you mentioned it too. I'm not a big fan of him either. I thought Zach Ertz deserved the job more than Dallas Goedert in Philly,
Mhm.
and instead in the end it was Dallas Goedert that got the job.
Yeah, and let's not forget that
Mar-
Ertz would go over 1,000 yards every now and then in Philly.
yeah, exactly. If he goes over 1,000 yards, then sure, pay him.
Yeah.
I want to pair up Mark Andrews and David Njoku. They both have roughly the same mark value that they're getting in previous years, but they're both just about to turn 30 years old. Both have been on the teams for a while, Baltimore and, of course, Cleveland. Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts first with David Njoku and then Mark Andrews. But David Njoku, with the money that he was making, do they let Cleveland do they walk from him? And then my follow up to that with Mark Andrews is, do they also let Mark Andrews walk because they have Isaiah Likely?
I don't think we should let Njoku walk in strictly just off the fact that not this past season because he missed he missed 6 games, uh, dealing with kind of just a lingering issue all year. The season prior, he had both career highs in receiving yards, touchdowns, and games played. So I think that we're kind of just finally now breaking the tip of the iceberg of what David Njoku's potential is. And we
Hmm.
saw that he actually wanted out of Cleveland towards the end of his rookie deal, and then had at the time his best career year. So I think in his seasons of where he's due to get paid, that's when he's able to blow up. And I think that we could just see so much more from David Njoku, and I hope that we're able to sign him back because I really, really do like David Njoku.
Fair enough. Fair enough. The Mark Andrews question on that with the follow up is because Isaiah Likely is also a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm correct, Likely is 20, just about 26 years old. Do they keep both tight ends, or do they let one of them walk?
That's a great question. I don't know what to think about Isaiah Likely, to be honest with you. I like Mark Andrews. Of course, if you're a fantasy owner of him, you didn't like him in at least like the first half to 10 games of the season. But did a lot better towards the end and in the playoffs. But that's definitely a question that I think will be a big one for the Ravens to answer because I think personally that they like Likely. Like they really do love Likely. I'm not the biggest fan on him. So my stance is going to be different from theirs, I feel. I think that they should re-sign Mark Andrews. He's been a top 3 tight end annually for the past 5 years, whatever. Likely, I don't know. I really don't like him. I think he's okay.
Yeah, you don't like Likely. I get it.
I don't.
Um, I mean, I had some ups and downs with him. He's been up and down for me too. But I think you keep the veteran guy. If you can get Likely for a cheap deal, then by all means go for it.
Mhm.
Because once Mark Andrews retires or maybe just kind of goes on a decline, then you have Likely who can step up.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I want to pair Jonu Smith and Jake Ferguson because them two have had back and forth breakout years here and there. Jonu being the most recent last year. If they produce like they have in their breakout years, do they find a team that they currently are on and they stay there, or do they move on and just again move on and find a new home?
I like them both. Those are guys that I think at their best can finish as top 5 in the tight end uh, position in fantasy. I think that they're going to get paid wherever they want to go.
Hmm.
And I think, like I said, they have tremendous upside when they're both healthy. And I guess that health it really factors into Jake Ferguson because he was hurt this past year. But I really like both these guys. I think that they're great at what they do, and I think that they could both get paid.
Yeah, fair enough. Uh, Quickly going on to Kate Otten. Kate Otten projected to be a free agent, 27 years old, just about, again on his rookie contract, projected $12 million a year. I think if I'm Tampa, I'm trying to keep the same team, and you re-sign him.
He's a
Easy enough.
beast. He's a beast. I
He
think they
is.
like
He's
him,
so good.
and I think they're going to sign him back for a good amount of money, and I'm all for it.
I'm all for it too. Baker stock continues to be on the rise.
Yes, sir.
Controller fell. That's what happened. Pulled the wire, you know. Kyle Pitts. This one's a big one because he's fallen into the pits many times because people have loved him and then people have hated him, and that's when he falls. Kyle Pitts, he's again was on his rookie contract. Kyle Pitts projected $8 million this past year with his, I believe he was tendered on that first year. What is it called? 5th year option, sorry. And then going to be about 26 next year. I think he moves on again from Atlanta.
I agree with you. And I, in all honesty, am not giving him more than $6 million a year. I can't. I really can't do it.
Agreed. I can see that.
He has not shown me anything.
Here's my question, and this is the follow-up with Zach Ertz, who's going to be a free agent who just got signed with Washington to a $6.25 million deal, whose market value is $5.25 for next year. Would you rather have Zach Ertz or Kyle Pitts on your offense?
Zach Ertz.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part of people with Kyle Pitts who believed in Kyle Pitts and who thought he was such a great prospect.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is different if you ask me whose potential would I rather have, but I would 9 times out of 10 right now rather take Zach Ertz over Kyle Pitts. I just would. I think he brings more to an offense.
Crazy to see. One last tight end to talk about, and this is going to be the number 1 tight end in free agency if he does set to hit free agency, which I doubt he will. I think they would make any possibility to keep him. Trey McBride. He is projected to make just shy of $18 million a year.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has had studded seasons. I think he eclipse over 1,000 yards this past season. I believe he did.
He had 1150.
Exactly, and I think Arizona would be crazy to let him walk. And I think if I'm Arizona, I'm trying to keep my star-studded tight end in Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison, Kyler Murray. I mean, the offense looks to be there. Now, can you produce with that offense is the question.
Yeah, no, his yards per season has gone up every year substantially. Same thing with his yards per game. This year he had 72 yards per game, and I don't know how many passing yards per game Kyler Murray throws for, but that's probably at least 1/3 of it. And he just had a Pro Bowl season. So I wasn't very high going into this year on Trey McBride, but going forward, I have to be because, man, I watched that offense a lot this year, hoping that Marvin Harrison would be the focal point. Hoping that Marvin Harrison Jr. would be the focal point, but he really is not at all. And I'm coming to terms with the fact that they love Trey McBride. And if you're a Trey McBride dynasty owner, congrats, because Arizona loves him.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I wasn't all in on Trey McBride. I kind of had a little bit of a liking to Trey McBride, but I didn't think he would be this great.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. That's 2026 top free agency. That's the market.
There's a lot of them, man.
A long show, but man, there's a lot of key pieces that could really shake up the free agency. Now, a lot of them are on club options with the wide receivers with the first round, so we could see a lot of them not be there next year, but this is what we're seeing now in 2025, March 16th. You see next year around this time, could be still a lot of big names on the board.
True.
That's going to do it for this week's show. If you haven't done so already, go to trophysmack.com/sportstime.hq. Go get yourself a trophy, a ring, or a belt. And again, if you haven't done so already, go to Underdog Fantasy. Use that code SportsTimeHQ. They're going to match your first deposit up to $1,000. Next episode, well, Gary's not going to be here. He decides to go on vacation. I'll also be on vacation, but we will be having a guest star on the show. Andy McNamara, I believe, from one Browns fan to another Browns fan. He comes on the show, and we'll be doing a Makalaka draft. So it'll be a big one to see. We may have another guest star coming on the show as well. But again, next episode is the 4th live version mock draft. This is post free agency, so this one will be a big one to see, and maybe we're going to see some shakeups in the first round. Jackson Dart, 21st overall. Maybe. Once again, you can follow Gary all over social media at GDPicks. And of course, I'm Fernando. I'm your host of Sports Time HQ. And we will see you all next episode. Again, live shows every single Wednesday and Sunday. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. and Sundays at 12 p.m. See you on Wednesday.